Lawrence. Hey, you found it. This is the Radio Lawrence podcast, where we discuss local art, politics, and community. Thanks for joining us as we host conversations with the people that make up the fabric of our town. I'm your host, Shane Powers. Joining us today is Lawrence's scariest toy purveyor, a man with a great story to tell. Welcome, Terry Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Terry, I've discovered in preparations for this interview that you might be the most interesting person in Lawrence. You have had you've lived like 17 lives, and so I've been laboring over how I get all of this into one single interview. And so I want to start out with your youth in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is a Lawrence podcast, but I'd like to tell us a little bit about what happened in Sioux Falls.
Well, as you can imagine, Sioux Falls, South Dakota wasn't the epitome of independent thought or punk rock aesthetic, but being a young kid, I knew at a really young age that I didn't fit in the Midwest aesthetic in South Dakota, and I knew I wanted to do other things. I discovered punk rock, heavy metal, skateboarding, horror movies at just a really, really young age. And I ended up joining a band when I was 15 years old called Face of Decline. And that band immediately got on a record label called Relapse Records, which is a humongous, now death metal record label. But back then, we were the second band they ever put out. And we were like a 3-chord punk rock, Green Day type thing. But Green Day wasn't, we didn't know Green Day then. We were just doing a similar thing, just in South Dakota. And I ended up networking through Maximum Rock and Roll, Flipside Magazine, a bunch of the old punk rock magazines back in the day, with other punk rock bands all over the United States. And I booked like the band The Offspring played my house. Green Day used to come through in the late 80s, stay with me for weeks on end. I'd have to guys, you just need to leave. But they were great, but Green Day it's funny, when I moved to Lawrence and met Jeff Fortier, who I started a company called Mammoth here in Lawrence, he and I would talk about bands like Green Day, The Offspring, the guys from the Foo Fighters were in some other bands called Diddley Squat and Christ on a Crutch. And they used to we all had the same stories about these guys coming through, kind of overstaying their welcome, just being really sweet dudes, but just the punk rock, play a house show, stay in the town for a little while, move on. And it was funny. He and I had similar stories about those bands that are now kind of legendary status.
Huge.
But in different towns. It was pretty crazy. But I started booking bands when I was about 15 years old in Sioux Falls. I just started reaching out, saying, hey, if you're coming through the Midwest, I have a garage. We do donations, whatever. So I was booking anyone you can imagine. Clutch played a garage show in my hometown on their first tour. Like I said, The Offspring. Green Day were just regulars. They would just drive 27 hours straight from the Bay Area, do Sioux Falls, either Lawrence or Madison, and then drive straight home. And they were just, all three guys were born. I was born in 73. They were all born in 72, so they were all teenagers as well. And, I was booking Green Day before Trey was even in the band. They had a drummer named El Sobrante that was kind of his own character as well. But through these connections, then once you book The Offspring, then they go back home and they tell all their friends in the Bay Area, hey, you need to get a hold of this Terry guy in Sioux Falls. He's running the show in Sioux Falls. And then next thing I know, it's just I'd come home and my answering machine would be filled with bands from all over the U.S. wanting to play. And they were cool, we'll just come, we'll play for beer money and chips and stay at your house and whatever. And it just spread like wildfire. And it's crazy. There was no internet, there was no cell phones, total old man statement. But
it is what it is.
I know. And it was always, a lot of times you just wrote letters to work out the details sometimes if you couldn't get each other on the phone. It was a really interesting time that I never knew would translate into a 30-year career in my life and also define who I am as a human being. Not to mention I was on a record label at 15 years old. And then every weekend I was playing shows. And it's funny because in Sioux Falls, in the junior high and the high school I was in, I was very unliked. Spit on, pushed around. I was like kind of the pariah that was like the punk rock skater that didn't belong. But outside of my immediate schools, I was very liked, but usually by people way older than me. Like they knew I was like the young punk rock kid bringing this kind of outsource into the city, but the people immediately in my perimeter that I went to school with just thought I was like this weirdo. And it was so funny. Kind of the icing on the cake is many years later, once a lot of these people I graduated with that had wanted nothing to do with me, all of a sudden were like, oh, can you be a speaker at the reunion? Oh, you used to be friends with this band. You used to book this band. Oh, it's funny. I'd run into people at gas stations years later after I graduated being like, Terry Taylor? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, you used to push me into my locker.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was. And I'll never forget this one guy in particular named Steve. He was like in all my grades, messed with me my whole life. Very big jock, just typical push me down in the playground type of thing, make fun of me all the time. Unrelenting, even until I graduated. I ran into him in a gas station like 3 years later, and he's like, Terry, and he's like, yep. He's like, so you were booking Green Day when we were in school, and I went, nice talking to you, Steve, and I walked off. I didn't even I'm not even going to continue the conversation with you because he's not caring about who I am, and he's caring about like what I did. But
what can you do for me?
Exactly.
Yes.
And it was very interesting. I got inducted into the South Dakota Rock and Roll Hall of Fame recently as a
Congratulations.
As a promoter. Thank you. It was funny. 30 years after the fact, feeling very vindicated by a city that at the time, the people who made the rules in the city did everything they could to squash what I was doing as a teenager.
Because you guys were smoking.
What's that? Oh,
because you were smoking.
Yeah, which I wasn't smoking. But funny enough, city never paid any attention to what I was doing. Then I was about 18 or 19 years old, and I had my first TV interview where I allowed a TV crew to come film a show I was doing at this place called Nordic Hall. And then, of course, the main thing they concentrated on was like that there was underage kids smoking at these events. And all of a sudden, it turned into like late night smoking and all this crazy stuff. All of a sudden, I magically get state audited. My dad, who was a police officer at the time, had some weird things happen with his job. They enacted a law from like the 1840s. Don't quote me on the year, but essentially it became footloose. All this happened in one foul swoop of them realizing that I had been doing all these shows. They enacted this law that was called that nobody underage could be at a place where there's music and have dancing going on. So they shoehorned slam dancing, circle pitting as dancing. So it became that they outlawed dancing, whatever, at punk rock shows. It made world news. I mean, like it was on CNN, Rolling Stone. It was huge. It was like Footloose in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it was just crazy, but it was the point where a lot of us were sleeping on the steps of City Hall so they would talk to us, trying to talk to the attorneys. It was crazy. Local judges came to bat for us. So like, our kids go to these shows. They're perfectly safe. There's nothing else for kids to do in the city. Even though it was just like, there was no official security there except for like one security guard that wherever hall we were at had to hire for their insurance purposes. We all self-police, as kids, policed other kids, make sure that no fighting, no smoking, I'm not going to police. I mean, that's, is what it is. And back then everyone smoked. I didn't smoke, but, most people did. So it was interesting, and it created this whole scene in my hometown by accident. And then by the time I was 20, I was booking bands like Nine Inch Nails, Metallica, Ozzy Osbourne. I was booking arena shows 5 years later after I started booking bands like Green Day in my garage.
incredible.
Yeah.
So do you stay in touch with any of these? Some of the bands that I noted, I watched the I Get Really Into It documentary about what you guys were doing there.
Yep.
You booked bands like Green Day, as you said, The Offspring, NoFX was on the list, Avail, Fugazi, Neurosis.
Yep.
These are huge names in certain circles.
Yep.
Do you stay in touch with any of those guys now?
I mean, realistically, no. When I was still booking shows up till 10 years ago or so, if I booked a show for them, sure, it would be like, hey, guy, how's it going? But no, I mean, some of those bands are such legendary stature. You don't just call. And I wish I could remember, but I got a bunch of messages about this. But Billy Joe from Green Day was on a podcast earlier this year and mentioned me by name about me booking their shows in the Midwest.
And now you're here on a podcast mentioning his name. Yeah. I bet he'll hear about this.
Yeah.
So being the collector that you are, I'm sure that you were gathering records during all of this. And
Absolutely.
Do you still have all of these old 7-inches and things from the South Dakota days?
So all the punk rock stuff that you couldn't get anymore, that was like local or something like, a lot of those punk rock bands used to screen print their 7-inch covers coming through. I kept all the stuff that mattered. But when I was in Sioux Falls, one of my saving graces, and this kind of connects to why I do the store here, was a record store called Ernie November that was located in Sioux Falls, which I ended up, when I was 19, I started working there. So I was essentially a touring musician, music promoter, and worked at this record store forever. And so before I decided to move here in 2003, I had about 12,000 records, and that was 10 inches, 7 inches, flexies, LPs, not to mention my CD collection, 9,000 DVDs. But working at a record store, like, can you imagine working at Love Garden? You get first pick.
You get a lot of stuff.
All the coolest crap that came in. So I had about 12,000 records before I moved here. And I decided to move to Lawrence on about 2 weeks' notice. I had done my time in Sioux Falls. The current band I was in at the time was kind of dissolving. I wasn't touring. I'd played Lawrence before. I'd toured all over North America and Canada and Mexico my whole life. But I was either going to move to Lawrence, Kansas, or Providence, Rhode Island. Both very similar cities, just in different parts of the country. But I'd found out that my mother had cancer. They'd given her 6 months to live, but she ended up living 16 years. But she
showed them.
Yeah, she did. Well, she's like from a town of 200 farming community. So it's, like, death ain't an option, It's like, but
we're tougher than that.
Yeah, but when she was diagnosed, I kind of waited around Sioux Falls to kind of see what was going on, but I don't know how to say this without sounding crass, but she just kept living. I mean, she went through strokes, heart attacks, all from the chemo, from everything, and just was like bouncing back. And so I just needed to leave, but I still wanted to be within driving distance of my hometown because of my mom. So inevitably, that's why I picked Lawrence. It was just a closer drive. And
we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. But to move here at such short notice, essentially, I sold pretty much my entire record collection, except for about 500 key records that were things that I couldn't get again, like independent releases, local bands from other places, or my place. Like the things that mattered, things that were irreplaceable. But I did have pretty much every pressing of every Misfits record you could imagine, every Revelation Records thing, every Discord. And a lot of that I regret selling. But I moved here with $45,000 in cash, like literally in cash. And I lived off of that money for 2 years while I started my career here in Lawrence. I moved here to to take over the Bottleneck and start booking the Bottleneck. And let's just say that the previous owner of the Bottleneck was not the most awesome human being in the entire world. And I knew a couple months in working for him was not going to work out. A gentleman here in Lawrence named Josh Hunt that I've been booking shows, he contacted me and said, hey, I kind of heard through the grapevine you're not really liking managing the Bottleneck. How about you and I get together and start something? So Josh and I got together, started a company, brought a guy named Jeff Fortier in, and then we started this company called Mammoth that is, I have since left, but they're still continuing full force right now.
So I had other questions about how you arrived in Lawrence. I think that we've pretty much
I jump everywhere.
You nailed it. You knocked it right out of the park. I'm gonna skip ahead to the fact that in addition to being involved in the promotional side of music, you still technically, is Hammerlord still technically active as a band?
No, Hammerlord was the last band that I was in, because I've been in like 20 bands. Was the last band I was in. Our drummer in 2015, might have been a little later than that, got an overuse injury in his right dominant leg. And if you know Adam Mitchell, drummer Adam Mitchell, he's an amazing drummer. He's a machine. His double bass is uncanny, but he got it to where it was almost like the signal from his brain to his foot was almost like lagging. So it came hard for him to keep time.
Okay.
And you can imagine if someone who's basing your livelihood on your skill
on your foot being on time,
can't do your skill. He went like, we just waited around, because Hammerlord was never a band that was about replacing people. That was a band. Most other bands I was in started for fun but turned into a career. Hammerlord I went into with, I want this to be fun and fun. I don't want it to be pressure. I don't want to, like, if we tour, we tour. If we don't, we don't. If we put out records, cool. You know, I didn't want it to be a thing where we're replacing members, and that just gets to be no fun. So we just waited for Adam, and it took maybe 3-4 years for him to get back to normal. And they never figured out exactly if it was a neuron pathway thing, a tendon thing, a muscle thing. They just never figured out. It just eventually just kind of worked itself out. But by then, I'd started the store. Other guys had moved on to other things. And we kept talking about trying to get the band together. Last year we got together. We were practicing last year, but it just seemed like everybody's, like, some of them had babies in the interim, got other jobs. Like, the store was in full force. So it just didn't seem to gel. Like, we just couldn't make the time to, because we were like, if we're going to do this again, it's going to be 100% and it's not going to be sloppy. And we just couldn't feel like we could do that. So I think we just decided to let the legacy die, essentially.
So you guys did enjoy quite a bit of success as a band. Tell us about some of the notable shows that you played and bands that you played with during your time with Hammerlord.
Oh, sure. One of the funnest shows we ever played is we opened up for Rob Zombie at Bonner Springs to 11,000 people. That was great. The heat index on stage that day was 130, I think it said on the thermometer on the stage. And I literally, you can ask my wife, like, we were done playing, I walked off, and I just collapsed on some of Zombies, because when I play, I do 200%. I don't just have.
I've seen the videos.
I just, like, it's 100. My wife said it's so funny. She knew I was a touring musician, but had never seen any of my bands play. And usually when I was playing, I was nowhere near Lawrence. So my wife and I had been together for a long time, and she had never seen me play, even though she knew I was, like, in Mexico and everywhere, but she had never physically seen me play. And she said the first time she saw me play, when we were coming through, we were actually on tour coming through Lawrence, played the Bottleneck, she was just like, I didn't even think it was the same person. So, but yeah, I mean, that show in particular was one of the most notable due to the size of the crowd for that band and the heat index and everything. But we played for, like, Alice Cooper, Black Label Society, Devil Driver, Marilyn Manson, a lot of fun, bigger bands.
A lot of big names there.
Yeah.
And you also brought a lot of big names through Lawrence working with Mammoth.
Yes.
What are some of the shows that you're maybe most proud of pulling off, or noteworthy shows that you put together?
Oh my goodness. That is a really hard one, because it all kind of meshes together, because I've booked so many things, but some of the stuff I was more proud of is, like, I was booking things like Paramore and, like, Panic at the Disco when they were, like, teeny tiny, like when they were just doing little club day things. And it's so funny when you look now to those bands who are headlining arenas. I always feel a sense, and I feel this way with Green Day, I feel this way with a lot of bands that have gotten big, that I was a very, very small, minute cog in a stepping stone to bands like that getting big.
There's something really neat about knowing that you were there.
Yes.
Around 2002, probably, I saw Rise Against with Against Me and None More Black at the Bottleneck.
Yep.
And I was like, I was totally not old enough to be there. I had a fake ID, and I look back at it now, and I'm like, oh my God, Rise Against is a really big band now. They're playing stadiums, and I saw them over at the Bottleneck, and there's something neat about like feeling like you were like the first person.
It's for me, it's not the elitist thing where some people are like, well, I liked Nirvana when they were before Nevermind. You know, for me, it's more just I'm such a punk rock kid at heart. I hate arena shows. I love small, intimate house shows, street shows. Like if your face is getting kicked in, it's awesome. Like I've never been like a get in the pit kind of guy, but I'm definitely the stand up front and might get walked on type of thing. But I like intimate. Like I love the replay. Like one of my first shows I ever played here, we opened up this band Caligari opened up for. I think it was the Murder City Devils at the Replay back in the early 2000s.
Wow. And
that was one of the most, but I was like, what is going on right now?
I didn't know they had ever played there.
Yeah.
I love Murder City Devils.
That's one of the reasons I fell in love with Lawrence. But yeah, there's so many shows. People always ask me like, what's like one of the favorite shows you booked or whatever. And of course, when I'm put on the spot, my memory just goes blank. And then the minute I'm driving down the street, I'm like, oh, blah, 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 you know.
I should have told him about that. You can add an addendum anytime you want. You're always welcome back.
Yeah.
So somehow during all of this massive success with promotion and touring as a musician yourself, you became a respiratory therapist also. Why did you choose that avenue instead of going all in with music and promotion? Well,
I had done 30 years of promotion and music. I had done...
By the time you were 35 years old.
Well, well I'm 53 now, and I kind of gave up on music in my mid-40s-ish. What really scared me, and I got like Josh and Jeff, who I started Mammoth with, you know, they're still going strong with Mammoth. It's kudos. It shows their resilience, whereas... In 2000, we had bought the Beaumont Club in Kansas City in 2006, 2007.
R.I.P. What a great place that was.
So great. And it was one of our most profitable venues that we used to rent and book shows at. Like, you know, I booked Static X there and, you know, Katy Perry and other bands before they were huge at the Beaumont. So much legacy there. And we had an option to buy it. It made sense. 2008, 2009, housing market crashes. Nobody has money. It's kind of what I feel like is kind of going on right now.
Don't look right at it. Don't look it in the face.
So 2008, 2009, and we're learning this right now. What do people cut out when they don't have money? Entertainment, frivolous goods like toys, movies, you know, music. And that happened in 2008, 2009, and the Beaumont just went from being like this amazing like investment for us to like a lost cause.
An expensive piece of real estate.
And so we had to fire a lot of our staff, not to mention close the Beaumont. And, you know, Josh, I've known Josh as long as I've lived here. And he is always like, there's not a plan B. It's just my plan A. We're going forward. I can't say that I'm as resilient as other people like that. I chronically worry about money. I chronically worry about my wife. I chronically worry about my dogs. I chronically worry about my friends being taken care of. And so I'm always like, well, even though my wife makes more money than me, you know what I mean? Like, but it's that sense of not wanting to disappoint other people, and especially like my wife and my family. So after 2008, 2009, I really had some serious... I hate to use it. People throw the term PTSD around, which is not what I had, but I really had some reservations about sticking in the music industry because that was the first time I really, and when you're a punk rock kid in 15, 16, 17, of course, like Neurosis, for example, I booked Neurosis one night and this other band Entombed the next night, 2 nights in a row in my hometown. I lost about $3,200 when I was about 18 years old. I didn't have $3,200. I had to borrow it from everyone. So, you know, I did have losses.
We lost $3,200,
yes,
comrade.
Yes. So I had losses before, but not to a scale that had happened where we had to close a club and let staffers go that were essentially family members, And that's anything I can say about Lawrence is the music community is one huge family. Like everyone's got each other's back. And when you don't, and I really dwelled on that and would talk about it with my wife. And even though things started kind of getting back to normal, 2010, 2011, I still had this like, well, if this could happen now, and I really took it harder than I think other people in the company. I don't know why, I just did. And so that's when the gears started turning like, maybe my time's up in music. Maybe I should move on. And I just kind of kept obsessing about it. And I can't tell you why. Like people in my life that knew me kind of tried to talk me off the ledge. Like music's like everything, you sure? You want to leave music?
You want to give up all of this and be a respiratory therapist?
So my wife, she had gone through nursing school. She'd been a phlebotomist for years and then got her nursing degree. And I'd been kind of involved with helping her study and all this stuff and became really interested in the medical community. So I went to Lawrence Memorial and I shadowed an x-ray tech, respiratory therapist, surgical tech, and a few other positions. Because being in your 40s, you don't want to think about going to school for 48 years.
Yep.
48. You want to be like, I want to go to school for a year or two if I'm going to get a degree because time is not on my side. So,
but you also don't want to do it again in 3 years. Be like, oh God, being a X-ray tech really sucked. I wish I had gone the respiratory therapist route.
Well, I love the respiratory thing. One, it connected me to my mom who had terminal lung cancer. Two, respiratory therapists are like the unsung heroes of the hospital. Like they handle everything from your ventilators, your life support, to just asthmatic trauma. They're the first person that people call essentially when someone comes in ER, because if they need anything that has anything to do with an airway, you have to have a respiratory therapist there. So I was fascinated with how they could do something as simple as just an inhaler, but they could also be involved with intubating a patient. I was like, this is awesome. It's like everything. So I applied to Johnson County Community College. They used to do an accelerated program where they fit essentially 4 years into 1 year. You couldn't miss one day, period. And when you go, they interviewed like 300 and some people and only 18 people get in the program. And I had a chip on my shoulder to get into this program. I was like, I'm getting in it. And when they interview you, like multiple interviews, they're like, you can't miss one day. I don't care if your dad dies. I don't care if someone's getting married. We don't care if your house burns down. You cannot miss one day, period. So I was like, it's going to be intense, but I'll make it work. And let me tell you, it was not being able to miss one day of anything is insanity.
Can't imagine.
And it was so stressful. And they've been doing it for years. But it was my particular class was so high maintenance about it. I was not. I was like, you know what? They told me in the interview, can't miss. But of course, like everyone in my class was like, well, I'm an exception. And it got to the point where they're like, we're gonna do a boycott because one of our students' fathers passed away, and he lived in Florida, and she was gonna have to go to Florida for the funeral. Well, you're in an accelerated program, you can't miss like 4 days. Everyone's like, well, we have to support her, and I had to stand my ground and be like, I am not risking. And this was like towards the tail end. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not on board. I feel really bad for her, and I had some family stuff go on while I was in the program, and I just had to deal with it. And I remember the director walking in when the class was trying to do almost like a revolt. She just walks in, and she's an intense woman. She just walks in, she goes, what part in the interview process of you cannot miss one day did you people not understand? She just walked in and went on this tirade for like 15 minutes, and it was just crickets in the room.
You're like, I told you guys. I told them not to do that.
Yeah. But when I first entered the program, everyone was quite a bit younger than me. No one would give me the time of day, essentially. Like I was like this older, long-haired, I'm fully tattooed, pretty tattooed all the way down. But then people would be like, what'd you do before you did this? I was like, I was a music promoter and a musician, whatever. And I'm like, well, what'd you, booked like local stuff, or what was the last thing you booked? I was like, well, let's see. Recently I booked Katy Perry and then the Strokes and, and I wasn't name dropping. I was literally trying to think, and I could tell when people look at you like a deer in headlights, like this guy is full of crap. Like I could tell no one would believe me when I tell you. I was like, I don't care. But then, I ended up being student of the year, 4.0, and an assistant teacher by the end of the program. So by the end, everyone was my buddy. But, people start adding you on Facebook and stuff. And then to be like, oh, you really did book like so-and-so.
I thought you were full of it.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why I'd lie. But so I graduated. I got a couple months in. I was working at KU Med. And I remember texting my wife and being like, I don't think I enjoy doing this full time. Because I was in, but I'd been my own boss for so long. And when you go through a program like the respiratory program, they're like, you are the master of your own destiny. When you get in the hospital, they will listen to you. They will take your ideas. And I'm an idea guy. I'm also a guy that wants to feel like I'm enacting change and that I'm helping progress whatever I'm doing. And I realized the administration at KU Med's like, we love your passion. We love you. But we don't think any things are going to happen, And
your ideas, they're great. They're too lofty.
Yeah, and it was just like small things, but it was like Office Space where it's like you have 13 people saying, "Hey, did you get the TPS report cover done thing?" And so I just knew my passion went. I liked helping people, but that was another thing is I'm very empathetic, and I would come home. You could ask my wife. I'd just be home, just agonizing about, a couple patients I had that day. And my wife's like, when I went into medical field, my wife's like, you were so empathetic. You can't worry about everybody. You can't save everybody. I was like, yeah, I can deal with it. I'm good. We're good. But I just again, I started bringing it all home. And that's kind of when the idea for the store kind of started. And my wife's like, the store actually started about in 2011 or 12, I started doing conventions because being a touring musician, I bought stuff everywhere. So by the time I stopped touring, I had 4 20 by 20 storage units you couldn't even walk in. It was a hoarder mentality. I'd buy stuff. I'd be in Canada, and especially in Canada back then, the American dollar used to go a lot more. And I'd be like, oh, I know I have 6 of these Lukes already, but what's another 9 of them for a low price? I'd buy them,
It's such a deal.
Hoarder mentality. But I would come home and I'd shove all this stuff in storage units. And they're like, oh, I'll deal with those when I'm home. But I'd be on tour for 2 months, come home for a month. Then when you're home for a month, all you do is work. Then I would leave for 2 months again and then come home with more stuff, throw it in the storage unit. Oh, I'll deal with this later. None of it ever made it in the house really, except for the stuff that I wanted to keep, like that I was really excited about. But my wife and I found out that we needed to do IVF therapy, which is expensive. So I started doing conventions selling toys because I had just mass amount of toys to put towards the IVF fund. And I'd been doing that for years before I was a respiratory therapist and whatever. But then once I was a respiratory therapist, I was still doing conventions. And unfortunately, the IVF stuff didn't work out. But I enjoyed the rehoming of toys. And so when I kind of confessed to her that hey, I don't know if I can do this respiratory thing full time for the rest of my life. It's mentally taxing on me. I'm worried about everybody. And I feel like a cog in the machine rather than, something that's helping progress the machine, I guess you could say. So it was her idea. She's like, well, you enjoy doing these conventions and selling toys. Why don't we open a toy store? And 8 years later.
So I want to hang on the respiratory therapist thing for one more question. In my research for this interview, I saw an article that I initially skipped over because I thought it was the hard times. I thought it was a satire article. And then I start watching Hammerlord YouTube videos, and in all the comment sections, it's like, Coma Kid brought me here. Oh. And finally, I'm like, okay, what the hell? What is going on with? And I go back and I'm like, oh, this was a serious, real article.
Yep.
Tell us about the Coma Kid.
Okay, so this. If I would have quit being a respiratory therapist that day, it would have been worth it. All the work, everything. So, 2015, I just started at KU Med, and I got called into essentially, we extubate patients. So if they're on life support and they're either ready to get taken off life support, either because they're doing better or because we're going to gently let them pass on into the night. I got called in that there's a 19-year-old that was in a coma. He had undiagnosed leukemia. He went into a coma at his home, and his dad had brought him to the hospital, but he didn't know he had leukemia at the time. So they said, he's doing better. We're going to take him off life support, let him breathe on his own, whatever. And sorry, excuse me. So I get called in. And when you do this, you're like, you talk to because even though the patient can't talk, they're still very with it. They have to be awake for you to take the tube out. So you go in, I'm Terry with respiratory. I'm here. I'm going to take your tube out. Again, I'm Terry. And I'm very anal about saying my name multiple times. So the patient is very comfortable with you, gets to know you because you're doing, it's not fun doing this it's not for the patient. So I have this 19-year-old with leukemia who doesn't know he has leukemia yet. The oncology, the cancer doctor, is standing in the doorway to talk to him, to tell him about what has happened to this poor kid. And his mother and maybe his grandmother were behind me. And so I'm like, I'm Terry, blah, blah. So we're going to take the tube out. So I take the tube out. And first thing people always ask for when they take that tube out is, I need water or food. Because depending on how long you've been on, you have not drank or ate anything. So even though you're getting nutrition through your lines, you're not that sensation. And so I was just like waiting. He's like, are you Terry? I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, said my name 100 times when I walked in, got my name tag. Makes sense that he would ask if I was Terry. He's like, Terry from Hammerlord? And I sat for a minute and I looked behind me and his mom goes, you're Terry from Hammerlord? And I'm like, I had to take pause because I had no idea what was going on.
You're like, am I Terry from Hammerlord? I thought I was Terry, the respiratory therapist.
And then the mom's like, you are his favorite band. And then I'm like, oh, well, yeah, whatever. So the oncology doctor is standing in the doorway like this, just staring, and he goes, what the hell is going on right now? Like he was just waiting to talk to this patient. So I ended up, his name's Mason, and I ended up talking to Mason forever. And the next day, I sent the whole rest of the band up to give him guitar lessons. And then I contacted all the local theaters because I found out through talking to him after I extubated him that he's a huge horror movie guy, heavy metal guy. So I got all the local theaters to send him posters, tickets, all this stuff. And he and I are still friends to this day. But the funny thing about that is, so that happened. We made our connection. We're still friends. Check to 5. So that was, I believe, December 15th, 2015, I think was the day. Every December, Mason posts his Facebook memory from the year prior. It says, hey, this is a year that I was diagnosed with cancer, and now I'm cancer-free. So 5 years later, during COVID, in December, Mason does his usual post, reposting his memory from the year before, which was from the year before, which was from the year before. And I think it's because everyone was pretty much sitting at home, but also everyone was down in the dumps. There was no things to look forward to. And it was just that weird thing. It hit Reddit. It hit every heavy metal website you can imagine. I had a friend that lives in England that it made to actual TV news there. And it went, if you say, when you say something going viral, this was something going viral. It was millions of shares. It was insanity. People from all over were just sending me messages, people that I knew, or like Canada, Mexico, oh my God, this is you, whatever, yeah. And so I hit Mason up, this is so cool. And I'd screenshot, because Lamb Goat, Metal Injection, all these metal sites, even record labels like Metal Blade Records would repost it, because Tom Araya from Slayer, he was a respiratory therapist before he was so everyone tried shoehorning other metal stories into this. And we had just posted like a video online of one of our videos, and in like 24 hours, it shot up like 40,000 views.
Wow.
And so I hit Mason up. I was like, hey, you might actually be getting like, it got so big and so many media outlets got it. I was like, surely someone's going to hit Mason up to talk about it. Neither of us got one interview request, which was so weird. But I kept hoping for Mason so he could tell his story, being a cancer survivor who's a metalhead, who's into horror movies and all this stuff. Yeah, it just blew up. It was bananas. But it was what we needed. And by we, I mean the human race needed a good story. And I was happy that I could be a small part of what was like a positive light in a really dark time.
It is a magnificent story, and thank you for relaying it for us. So you kind of touched on it, how you got into opening the store. But before opening 1313 Mockingbird Lane, you put on the Ad Astra Toy and Art Fair at Liberty Hall in 2017. Oh. Tell us a little bit about your journey from, you've started down the path already, but from toy collector to toy show participant to toy show host, and then finally to toy store owner.
It was, it went from conventions. And then
I feel like I'm walking you through the steps of your addiction where like, so tell us about when you were just using it recreationally and then you started buying it on the streets and then tell us a bit.
Well, it's funny because people are always like, well, when did you start collecting toys? And it's like, I can't remember a time that I never collected toys. I mean, I feel like I've always said the three things that are part of my DNA are movies, music, and toys, and not necessarily in that order. It just kind of depends on what part of my life I'm at. And truth be told, my home life was not the best. A lot of us can say that, but my parents, between themselves, had a lot of issues and a lot of abuse between each other. Never with me. I was an only child. And I will say, if anything, the one thing my parents always made sure with me is that I was always surrounded with toys. And so I can never say that my parents ever neglected me in that respect. So my mom was a deal shopper. And if there was a sale on something, she'd just buy the whole rack. Like, she'd just buy me anything that was on sale or whatever. So I always had toys. So I grew up with toys. My parents were responsible for buying me my favorite toy, late 1970s Godzilla Shogun Warrior, which is actually so precious to me. I won't even bring it to the store. It's still at home, but it's painted in the doorway on the outside of the store. And also my mom... You still have the exact very same one from your childhood? Yes. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. And my... Mom also bought me a Kiss Love Gun record from, What kid doesn't need a copy of that album? So that album came out, I think, in 73 or 74. I was born in 73. And she bought that for me when I was like 4 or 5. And, my mom was so small town, she didn't realize that the term love gun referred to a part of a male. And, but she knew from a young age, I just was obsessed with Halloween from like birth. And I remember so vividly, I don't remember a lot of things from my childhood, but I remember vividly my mom bringing this record home for me to play on my little blue Play School record that I was playing Spider-Man comic things on. She's like, well, I bought this because I know you like Halloween and scary things. And these guys look scary. She had no idea who Kiss was. Boom. Gene Simmons, my favorite bass player in the world. Boom, I'm a metalhead. Like, just like that, overnight, Kiss Love Gun set the rest of my life in motion. It was crazy, even though they kind of suck as people now, I guess. But that record made me want to be a bass player later in my life when I was about 12. Got me into heavy metal, totally defined the rest of my life. But so collecting toys from a kid and then into an adult. All my friends that collected toys when they were young in my hometown stopped collecting toys in their teens because it wasn't cool. Girls won't like it. I was like, why would I want to date a girl that doesn't like Transformers? Ugh. So I always collected toys, never stopped, never took a break. I've always been into it. Started doing conventions, for what I was saying before. And then my wife... It's funny. She's like, I'm not a risk. It's so funny. It probably sounds like I am, but I'm not really a risk taker. So my wife's like, we should start a store in the garage. Cause like Borders had closed in Lawrence. Half Price Books had closed in Lawrence. Hastings had closed in Lawrence.
I miss Hastings so much.
Two of my cabinets are from Hastings in my store. I went in the last day they were open, October 2015, and I bought the whole half, all their cabinets in the back.
Awesome.
I was going to use them for like my man cave, but they eventually just turned into a store.
You just got a bigger man cave.
Yes. Well, my man cave is actually Tom's recording studio in the backyard, but
you were going to start a store in your garage.
yeah, sorry. I digress.
That's what I'm here for.
I jump all over the place.
I cause digressions. I bring us back.
Yeah. So I'd enjoy doing conventions and everything. And then Toys R Us nationally closed. So there was really no toy stores around. And my wife's like, you enjoyed doing conventions. She's like, we could convert the carriage house, which is our house is from 1862. So the garage, which is separate from the house, was actually a carriage house back in the day, then eventually turned it into a garage. So we converted that into a toy store. We took all those Hastings cabinets I bought, we hung them up in the garage, painted the floor, this spooky walkway, and made it look like a mini version of what the store is today. And I opened up the second weekend of every month as kind of like a garage sale, per se. And I hung this sign, and the sign hangs behind the counter in the store today. This wooden sign my wife made, 1313 Mockingbird Lane. And it was so funny. My wife's like, well, if we start this store, like, what would you call it? And I grew up on the Munsters. So 1313 Mockingbird Lane is the address of the Munsters, the 1960s TV show. And even at a young age, I fell in love with the Munsters because I feel like that show was so far ahead of its time. You had 5 completely different beings living together in harmony. And I knew at a young punk rock age, now that's what it's about. Getting along with everybody. Doesn't matter if you're green, white, a vampire, male, female, everyone gets along. That was my punk rock ideal. So I grew up on the Munsters. So my wife's like, well, what are we going to call this thing we're doing in our garage? I didn't even hesitate. I went 1313 Mockingbird Lane. I had never even thought about it before. And then I backtracked. I was like, I don't know. And she's like, no. She's like,
think long, think wrong.
She's like, yep. So we started this garage sale second weekend every month out of our garage for a year. And we built up a really grassroots. It's much like how I did concert promoting. Started out of a garage, really small, and tippy-toed into bigger things. So we went from conventions to a garage to a 200 square foot retail space on Mass, which was our first location, to a 700 square foot space that was 4 doors down from my original space. Mm-hmm. And now we're in about 1,600 square foot between the second half we opened 2 years ago.
You've opened up a wall in there, right?
Yeah, I talked to my landlord, and I was just, because Lucky Dog was in there before us.
Uh-huh.
And that's where we got the idea from. They did the same thing. They started in one space, cut a hole in the wall, took the second space. And so when we moved in, I only wanted half, so the landlord just put, kind of like a false wall in the place. And then when we wanted...
Just put a poster over that.
I know, just like... But then when we decided we needed more space, and we love our landlords. They used to own Amy's Cafe downtown.
I miss Amy's Cafe every time I'm...
The Strongs that own Amy's, that own my building, are some of the nicest human beings I've ever had in my life. They're so caring. They care about us succeeding as a business. They're always like, if you're having any trouble, just let us. We've never been like, but they just make us feel very comfortable. They make us feel very protected. That should something happen, and let's say rent is going to be late one month, they're not going to kick us out. I mean, we've never been. I'm always early with my rent, but they chronically reinforce that we're in this together, that we're just not their customers. So I didn't want to move because we love them. And so I was like, hey guys, I know Lucky Dog did this first, but can we cut that hole back in the wall? And I mean, Carrie was down there in 2 days, putting that hole in the wall for us. So it's been a really good symbiotic relationship between us. But so we just baby stepped.
And when you were ready to knock out this hole in the wall and expand, you already had inventory, right? This is all you still have storage units full of things that you've hoarded over the years.
So I currently have a 2-story warehouse that I rent. That's 2,000 square feet that's filled. But then also, the most common question I get when people walk in the store is, where do you get all this stuff from? And, 50% of our store is used, which is either partially from my collection or partially from things people bring in the store for me to buy. But the other 50% is brand new stuff, just like you'd walk into Walmart, Target. Mm-hmm. So we get our stuff from the same places they get it, like wholesalers, and that we just can't buy them in the huge quantities and get the price discount like they get. But yeah, so I every morning I go to the warehouse and I pretty much grab a car full of stuff and truck it into the store. So
incredible. Terry, that's all of the long form question and answers that I've prepared for you. I want to move now into the final segment of the show, which I have dubbed the lightning round.
Oh, God. Oh, I'm so bad at this stuff.
You're going to do great because I've tailored, no pun intended, all of these questions to you more or less. So I've got about 10 questions. I may have added an 11th. I don't know.
Okay, I'm scared.
But I'm going to ask you a question. You can answer that question in as many or as few words as you see fit.
Okay.
You don't have to explain your answer if you don't feel like it.
Okay.
And I won't be asking any follow-up questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I hope so.
What is one song that you turn off immediately?
Turn off immediately. Macarena.
Did you ever find the mix-up pull string doll where Pee Wee Herman had Freddy Krueger's voice?
Oh, my goodness. That is a white whale for me. I have not actually had one in my grubby paw, but there was one at Planet Comic-Con a few years ago for $3,000. Couldn't do it.
What's your favorite horror film franchise?
I don't have a favorite horror film franchise, but some of my favorite films are May, Ginger Snaps, and Session 9.
Who's your favorite comic book villain?
Comic book villain. Oh, my God. That is a very tough one. I'm going to say Green Goblin.
Where's your favorite place in town to order takeout?
Zen Zero.
What is one collectible that you've sold and wished you had back?
Oh, my goodness. I got the movie The Thing. This company that's no longer around anymore, Soda Toys, did a bust of the spider head. And super hard to find. Someone traded in a sealed one, and it was on my bucket list. But I'm a man of my word, and when I started the store, I told my wife, if something gets traded in for the store, I cannot keep it. And someone traded one of those in, I couldn't keep it, and it ended up selling it, and I regret it every day.
Professional wrestlers are divided into heels, the bad guys, and baby faces, the good guys. Which one are you?
I would like to say I'm a heel, but I'm definitely probably a baby face.
Who is the greatest heel?
Oh, I am not a wrestling aficionado.
You're not?
Even though everyone's surprised because Terry Taylor, the wrestler, but I am not a wrestling aficionado. But I do gravitate towards The Undertaker due to his horror theme.
You bailed me out. I was going to have to edit that question out. Who would win in a cage match between Glenn Danzig and Henry Rollins?
Oh, Henry Rollins, no question. Did you see that video of Glenn getting
knocked out cold?
Barely great. And let me tell you, one of my biggest love-hate relationships in the entire world is with Glenn Danzig.
That's every punk rocker's biggest love-hate relationship.
Everything he's ever done, excluding maybe the last 10 years of his records, are like, I will be buried with my Sam Hain, first couple Danzig records, Misfits records, but that guy is his own worst enemy. It is so frustrating.
I feel like in recent years, he has come around to be able to laugh at himself in a way that I didn't think Glenn Danzig was capable of. Like, have you seen the episode of Portlandia that he was on?
I did. I can't figure out if he's making fun of himself or if he thinks it's some kind of weird redemption. I don't know. But I feel like he does not have a sense of humor about himself at all. But I will say, I know what he's making doing these Misfits reunion shows, and he's laughing all the way to the bank.
I went to 2 of them.
So I wanted to go so bad to Riot Fest, like the first one.
That was the first time I went to Riot Fest.
You have no idea how I agonized, but I truly, truly did not believe it was going to happen.
It happened.
I could not, honestly, I would have bet my 1970s Shogun Godzilla on that thing because, when Misfits did the resurgence of the American Psycho, Famous Monsters. I kind of befriended Jerry only through a lot of the shows and would talk to him about stuff. And he just, he's like, I want to do it. Glenn will never do it, kind of type of thing. And just through being in the music industry forever, dealing with Glenn, one of my funniest Glenn stories is Hammerlord opened up for Danzig at the Uptown Theater. And this is when Doyle was with him for part of the set. So what they would do is they would do a Danzig set, and then they would do a couple Misfits songs, do more Danzig songs, and then come back for a full Misfits set. So they played like a couple Misfits songs in their set, but they were supposed to be doing like a whole other 4, 5, 6 songs afterwards. So Glenn's obsessed with people taking his pictures at shows. Like, you can't have a camera. It's this whole thing. How can you enforce that with 1,000 people?
I saw them at MGM on the second stop of the reunion tour in Vegas. I went out to see it specifically, and they had these yonder bags.
Oh, they were doing that then?
You put your phone in a bag, and you can't get it out until security opens it for you. That's how you enforce that.
I've been to a few shows like that. Oops, sorry. But it just wasn't, I don't think he was doing that for every show. But of course, everyone had their phones out. So I remember they did their set. I'm standing side stage. Doyle is standing in front of me with his guitar, ready to go on stage to finish, to do like the 4 or 5, like essentially the Misfits set. Mm-hmm. So we're waiting, and Doyle's just like kind of standing there waiting for his cue to go on. And then the tour manager is like in the office right by side stage at the Uptown Theater, and we hear, Danzig's left the building. He's not coming back. And Doyle just throws his hands up and just walks off. And apparently Danzig was so mad that people had their cameras out, he refused. And there was no refunds offered because technically they played a couple Misfits songs. They didn't do a Misfits set, but they did on the flyer it advertised Danzig playing, I can't remember the verbiage, but essentially some Misfits songs. So the fact that he played like 2 songs qualified to the agent and everybody that was a Misfits.
That was good enough.
Yep. People were so mad.
Well, Terry, I could sit here and talk about this stuff with you all day. We've blown through the lightning round. I want to give you the last word. What do you have to say to anyone in Lawrence who might be listening to this? Any kids collecting toys? You call it. What do you want to have your last word be?
Well, I always say this, that I don't, pertaining to the store, I don't feel, beyond a few other, Portland or Providence or cool cities, I don't feel this store would have survived like it has if it would not have been in Lawrence. I think if I would have opened up in Kansas City, which I did consider doing actually before Lawrence, I don't think we would have made it. But Lawrence really came through during COVID. How we even ended up moving. We were in this 200 square foot store. COVID happened. I'm a respiratory therapist, so I'm back full time, work in the hospital. Store is going to reopen back up, but my wife and I did not feel good about opening during a respiratory illness with a store that only fits 4 people in it, our first location. So we were just going to close. And then we ended up deciding to move down the block to the slightly bigger store. And expenses increased, everything increased, but Lawrence came and supported local business and specifically our store so much that next year, once people could get back out after COVID. It's sustained us for a long time. Like sometimes I get actually very emotional talking about it because I don't feel that this town gets enough recognition for how it supports local businesses, because I feel like so many businesses here survive because people go out of their way not to buy stuff off Amazon or Walmart or Target, which I'm not telling people not to do because I have to buy from those places. It's just with some stuff, you know. But this town, I think we're all very lucky to live here. There's a big sense of community. People like to help each other, and I try and do that with the store. Anything I can do to try and like give back to Lawrence, I try and do in the best way I can. But I feel pretty lucky that my store is located in the city.
I feel like we're lucky to have you. Thanks so much for coming in today, Terry.
I appreciate it.
Everybody go check out 1313 Mockingbird Lane for your collectible and toy needs. Say hello to Terry, obviously a great guy and a great part of our community. Thanks, Terry.
Oh, thank you.